I don't know if you heard, but the box office on this one has been an absolute travesty for Marvel and Disney. It's the lowest grossing MCU movie in history. And part of that is because of the strike. The fact that the actor strike was still going on. Brie Larson and crew weren't really able to promote the movie as much as they normally would have. But I think it's more a sign of the fact that people are just really getting sick of the oversaturation of mediocre comic book movies, increasingly mediocre comic book movies. In my opinion, they've always been pretty mediocre. Even when Iron Man, Captain America, the Infinity Saga, the golden era of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I thought those movies were pretty mediocre too. To be honest, it's never really been my cup of tea. But now without their main stars and that sort of cohesion with the core group, it's just like people have all tuned out. No one cares enough about Captain Marvel and Shang-Chi and these side B characters. Do you think that this is like really representing the end of the Marvel dominance and comic book cinema dominance at large? I know we've had this conversation before, but do you think this is the final nail in the coffin?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been turning in that direction for a while. I think it's all been downhill since that Spider-Man movie broke a fuckload of records, right? When they did the Spider-Man Marvel crossover most recently, and we watched it. I thought the movie was dog shit.
No Way Home.
Yeah, made a bunch of money. And I think it's been downhill since there. I've been praying on their demise for as long as I can remember. Since the first Avengers movie came out, since Captain America, and since Iron Man, I have been tired of it. I have been sick of it. I have not been interested at all. Honest to God, guys, I don't think I've enjoyed a single Marvel movie, so I'm definitely not their fucking target demographic. I don't like to be fed like a bird. I sometimes like to think when I go to the movies, and if I don't, I have to be a little bit
pretentious bastard.
What are you talking about, dude? Are you kidding me? Like this assembly line hawk? Oh, it's fucking terrible. So I'm happy to see the film industry move on, and I would like to see some creative, original fucking blockbusters again for once in my fucking life.
Oh yeah, dude. I'm mostly giving you a hard time. I also hate the Marvel stuff for the most part. I mean, some of the early ones were decent. The first Iron Man is, I think, a genuinely pretty solid comic book movie. There's a couple other ones that are decent, right? But it did get, pretty mind numbing and only getting worse in most people's opinion. But yeah, I mean, obviously I like Godzilla movies. I always like to add that caveat. I'm not above some big budget blockbuster bullshit, right? I can't wait for the new Godzilla Kong movie. Someone was asking about that in the chat, my opinion on the new trailer. I think it looks freaking dope. It looks super silly. It basically looks like a live action cartoon at this point, but I'm here for it. So I understand that, the way that I feel about those movies is the way a lot of people feel about the Marvel stuff and comic book stuff, but I just think it's got to the point where
we had like 100,000 fucking Godzilla movies rammed down our throats, and then like 45 Offspring TV shows, and then like for the last 15, 20 years, nothing. But like, how many Marvel movies under the Marvel umbrella have there been? Like,
I think like almost 30 at this point.
Yeah, it's a little bit fucking overdone at this point. If we had like 8 of them, I would be like, well, it's not for me, but a lot of people liked Iron Man and the Incredible Hulk, right? Like, right. I'm pissed they didn't bring Ang Lee back to fucking reinterpret that. No, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting though. I think that probably much like how they had a lot of success with the No Way Home movie, bringing back Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire to reprise their roles as Spider-Man, cashing in on the nostalgia in just the most shameless way possible. I think they're probably going to do a similar thing with the Marvel, where it's going to be like they're going to do one final Avengers movie. They're going to resurrect Iron Man, Captain America, all these characters that have been killed off for a big kaleidoscope of cameos, and make $1 billion with that. And then they might try to salvage the MCU by bringing in the X-Men. I know that's Kevin Feige's plan, but I think they're going to probably squander that too under the current direction of Marvel over at Disney. But yeah, it's interesting to see the kind of implosion of the comic book cinema wave that has just dominated movie culture for the last decade or so.
Shout out to you, and shout out to you, Prisoner of Gravity. Except for Loki and Across the Spider-Verse. Well, Across the Spider-Verse actually had a real creative team that spent fucking a lot of time on it. It was very interesting. It was very visually stimulating. It was actually creative output. I like Spider-Verse a lot. If that was the kind of interesting stuff that they were doing with you know, the IPs that they have, I would be way more interested in Marvel if they like let somebody like Tim Burton do like a fucking Thor movie. Tim Burton, like 40 years ago, I should say, but you know what I mean? Like out there stuff. If they were like Richard Linklater is going to direct the new Spider-Man movie and it's going to be a real coming of age story, I'd be like, that's an interesting approach. Maybe it won't be for me, but that's at least like clever. Martin Scorsese is going to do like the fucking mobbed up fucking, you know what I'm saying? It's not going to happen, but I'm saying that would at least be more interesting to me, like the Spider-Verse. Never checked out Loki. I know that Tom Hiddleston, is that his name? He's a very good actor, a competent actor. The only Thor movie I ever saw was I was with my friend Brigham when we were 15, and we were trying to go see fuck if I remember something else, and it was sold out, and then we had to go see Thor instead. And
the original Thor?
No, I think it was the sequel. When did the first one come out?
Like 2011.
Yeah, I was going to say this was like 2013. So, but then it was like it had Natalie Portman in it, I think.
Yeah, I think that was Thor: The Dark World, probably.
We left like an hour in to go get high, so I was like, all right, yeah, it wasn't very good.
Yeah, shout out to you, Prisoner of Gravity. I heard the new season of Loki is actually decent, but the problem there is that that's like one of their last decent characters, one of the last OG characters, and I think that character's basically finished in the MCU. Like after season 2 of Loki, he's not coming back from what I understand. And then, yeah, as far as Across the Spider-Verse goes, I really enjoyed that film. I think they're doing really interesting stuff with that trilogy. And honestly, I think that Spider-Verse trilogy makes the case that a lot of the comic book cinema should be animated. Like, I think that so many of the Marvel movies have this sort of like dull gray color palette. Not all of them. The Guardians
filmmaking.
Yeah, totally. Like there are exceptions. The Doctor Strange movies have an interesting visual aesthetic, same with the Guardians movies, but for the most part, they just have this super dull kind of like gray look. They're all shot on the same camera. And the Spider-Verse movies, you know, they actually feel like translations of comic books. Like they feel like comic books brought to the big screen in a real way, in a way that I find so much more visually interesting and stimulating than basically anything that the MCU has done. I am excited to see what James Gunn does with the upcoming DC movies, because he's actually an interesting filmmaker and he's actually has a unique voice. So he might be able to, you know, kickstart the whole superhero craze when Superman Legacy comes out. We'll see. I'm skeptical, but if anyone can do it, it's probably James Gunn. But yeah, shout out to you, Prisoner of Gravity. Thanks for chiming in. Marvel's in an absolutely dismal state right now. I don't even think that the X-Men can save them at this point.
Yeah, and I feel like people already associate X-Men with Hugh Jackman being Wolverine, and it was already kind of done. And I know even they won you over with that movie Logan that they put out, which was kind of like an interesting approach to the character. That's the kind of stuff that I think there actually is like wiggle. The Joker film, for example. Like I'm not opposed to like integrating these IPs, because it was funny. I was actually talking to my homie Bruce about the Joker, and he was like, oh, you got to see King of Comedy, then you'll really fucking love the Joker. And I was like, oh, that's one of Gavin's favorite Scorsese movies. He was like, it's fucking underrated as all shit, which I was like, oh, you and Gavin should gab about this, because that's another one of his favorite takes.
Oh yeah, dude, Joker's a total like amalgamation of Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. I think it works. I really enjoyed Joker, and I totally agree that movies like that, movies like Logan or the Batman from Matt Reeves, is really like where comic book cinema can thrive. Same with the Spider-Verse movies, you know, like unique takes where it's not all just this like, you know, sameness trying to build to something, trying to create a cinematic universe. That can work. I mean, it clearly did with Marvel, but I think when they just keep trying to make that work, that it does become a little bit exhausting trying to keep up with it all. And, you know, especially when you introduce the streaming stuff and the TV shows, it just becomes too much for your average viewer to keep up with. But yeah, shout out to you, Prisoner of Gravity. Thank you so much for the $5, and thanks for tuning into the show.